Welcome to Property Quorum. As you can see by the stalwarts of Property Quorum, of course, Chris Gilson of Woodhouse, Juliet Babwell of Gallagher, and of course, in no way bringing up the rear, Hamish McClay of Surgical Convey. And here we come to discuss, hopefully, the things that will strike a chord with you. And if they don't strike a chord, I hope they strike fear into you. One thing, they should strike something. And today's topic is, I believe, something that I will appeal to at least one of our members, and that is shared living or shared headache. Of course, we're referring to HMOs. And to start us off, as is traditional, Hamish McClay.
A great addition to the housing industry. I say housing industry, the housing sort of status, because it was helping a number of people get themselves into some kind of almost independent living, getting away maybe from mum and dad, whatever it was, just to get themselves started, moving sort of somewhere so they had a bit of control over their own lives. And it certainly helped for a number of years. And it was, I don't know, I think it must have been about sort of 15 years ago, it started creeping into the work that we were doing in terms of gathering information from councils. And we started to see, houses of multiple occupation. You now need to get planning permission before you actually go about any conversion in certain parts of the country. Places like Oxford, for example, full of students. They've always done. So there was an awful lot of shared accommodation there already. So we're looking to put an element of control into it. However, that isn't the challenge, because it has become ever more popular. Somewhere like Bicester, masses and masses of houses being built all the time, and a fair number of HMOs. I don't know what the proportion is. I don't know what the proportion of houses of multiple occupation happens to be, but it is a significantly enough number that one notices it. Now, what has actually sort of happened, whereas in some respects it was considered to be an ideal addition to the market, it's now considered to be an escape route for others, because it's somewhere that people can be put who shouldn't really be in this country. They're here illegally. But it's a good way of actually stashing them away somewhere, because certain government bodies have been given money to actually put them into such like sort of properties in preference to that of the local community. So there's two aspects to look at from that particular angle, but there's also, who does it actually benefit, these houses of multiple occupation? I don't know, but I'd pass over to a couple of experts who will be able to tell me.
Right, now quickly, I'm going to start off with Juliet, because I'm going to save potentially the most riotous to last. We'll start with that. Juliet, HMOs, at one point reviled, and other points actually seen as the saviour of modern housing, given that there's an ever-increasing a number of people needing to be housed, and less houses available, given that nobody's building them really at a high rate, and that hundreds and hundreds of potential locations are stuck within this cladding nonsense. What is this? Is this a nightmare, or is this just a dim, distant saviour that we haven't quite made our way to yet?
Well, I think when people look at it as a headache, they're looking at the sort of regulatory element of it, what they need to do to become compliant. And a lot of what I've seen, and I don't profess to be an expert, Chris has obviously been through all of it, but I've seen people try to stick people in houses, call it an HMO, and then the local authority needs to get involved. And that's why you have so much regulation, because they've tried to put people in places that were uninhabitable. So in a sense, every nook and cranny in a house where there is multiple occupation, you're trying to create another room, which is not within a certain size for an actual human, and you're shoving them in there. And so regulation has had to happen. And so what you've had is previously, there's something called the Article 4, where before an Article 4 comes into the play, you're able to convert your house into an HMO. And now you're seeing a lot of Article 4s in play, where the local authorities in specific areas are saying, you actually need to physically apply or formally apply for this license. And that's because people have abused the system insofar as trying to fit people into every which way. Where I do get involved is looking at restrictions on the title and whether a landlord can in fact convert a property, or someone who's buying the property can in fact convert it into an HMO when there's a restriction that says you can only use it as a single private dwelling or as a private dwelling. And that in itself has challenges.
Well, I've done a little bit of stats for you, Chris, in the background. I thought you might be interested to know this. Did you know, I'm sure you're probably painfully aware, in England, there are currently 476,000 registered HMOs.
Mm-hmm.
The growth has been per year to this point approximately 2 to 2.3%. So healthy, I would say. In London, increased 5.4% over that same period, and West Midlands 8.8%. So further north, perhaps there's more of a appetite for it. This is the market you find yourself in by choice, and it's got its challenges. Yes.
Those figures are probably just for the licensed HMOs as well. Anything that's 4 bedrooms or less won't require those licenses, so won't come into those stats most likely. But shared housing is not a new concept. It may have formalized over the last 40 years or so into being defined as an HMO, but it's not new. We've had bedsits, we still have bedsits. We have shared houses, we still have shared houses. We have student houses from back in the 60s, 70s and 80s that have morphed into this more regulated industry. And if you go back a bit further into the not so distant past, you used to have tenements, and these were massive shared properties, and they were actually owned by the church, covering huge square blocks. So, excuse me. Someone's trying to get
But back then, Chris, people would be renting out in tenements by room.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. And again, not too long ago, those certainly in Liverpool, those massive tenements were times changed, and the city wanted to improve housing standards and conditions for its residents, and so they started to do building programs and rehouse the people out of the tenements, and then eventually when the tenements were empty, they got knocked down, demolished and repurposed as recycled land.
Yes.
But it's that process in between. We're kind of in that process in between again. So we're at the mercy of, it comes back to not having enough housing stock, enough building programs that are active. HMOs have prospered and formalized over the last 40 years because of that lack of investment in our housing stock. It's been a stopgap. So people, creative landlords and property investors and entrepreneurs who are in that property sector have thought, well, what can I do to improve housing conditions? Are you repurposing the existing housing stock that we have? Because building is so bloody expensive, or land is so expensive, or what people need at a larger level is so expensive that I just can't get into that. But there is a stopgap at this point in time, while the government has turned its back on everyone and is not doing the things that it needs to be doing, and is completely talking out of one side of its face when it's talking about these promises that it's going to deliver and doesn't. And there is a huge amount of demand there for housing. So that's the reason they exist in the first place. And it does cover a large number of different niches, different market segments who want to rent for these different properties. So an HMO is not just an HMO. If I was going to turn around a professional HMO targeting adults in their 20s and 30s now, that is not the same product that I would put students in. It's not the same product that I would use for general needs social housing. They're different. They've got different requirements, different demand appetites, different price points, and different finishes. So yeah, it is now a formalized industry. It is quite a wide industry with lots of different opportunities, and I get why there's that level of I guess NIMBYism, that people don't want something like that. But that's what it is. Ultimately, you're saying, well, I don't want these people living near me. Well, okay, what does that boil down to? Let's have a discussion around that. But people have a right to safety and shelter and a roof over their head and food, all the basic needs in that the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this is the bottom level stuff. So yeah, people do deserve a roof over their head. And yeah, I get the argument that illegal immigrants shouldn't be in this country. Yeah, that's another one of those many niches that exist out there. But yeah, the government is housing them while they run their asylum checks, and if they shouldn't be here, they're going to get deported. That's what the process we all expect should happen. But that's just one tiny microcosm of the HMO industry. There's all these different, for example, loads of providers that we work with who are helping people get back on their feet, women's refuge, people escaping domestic violence, people who are at risk of being homeless or have been made homeless or are on the streets and looking to be rehomed. There are huge amounts of sections of the social housing spectrum that have need for these types of properties because there's not enough of the types of properties where most people desire and want to live, and it's a stepping stone. It's a place to live in the interim.
I mean, I know there are mentions of the use of these things to salt away asylum seekers and so on. Is that a high proportion? I was under the impression it was actually quite a low proportion.
I think it's quite low, actually. So we've got some experience in like an awareness of different organisations that operate with the central government, and who then they basically push it out to the private sector. There's a lot of pushback from the local authorities. It's all very political at that particular level, because it is an undesirable element from that political perspective, because it's constantly getting pushed in the media as a bad thing. And I mean, it's the main reason the central government will not run it in house, that they have to kind of outsource it. So yeah, that is a political hot potato. It is quite a painful point for both the central government, for local government, for people who there's been a war on migration for quite some time. Yeah, that, like I say, that is a small microcosm of why HMOs exist, and the number of HMOs that you quoted, near 500,000 that exist at the moment in this country.
Actually, the only ones that are properly registered out there are 263,000. The rest are estimates from elsewhere. I did a little digging while you were talking in Liverpool, because I know that's your stomping ground, and it seems that stage one scoping, which is identifying wards with high private renting, and I would say 63% of homes privately rented. As you said, 58% are students in Liverpool.
There's 3 unis here, so that doesn't surprise me.
Right, exactly. And of which the highest amounts are in Greenbank, mostly students there. The stage 2 evidence, which is estimate of HMO shares of housing stock, shows that Kensington Fields has 45% of properties which purport to be HMOs, but that's only what's registered, as you said. The growth appears to have been dramatic since 2016 in Liverpool.
Liverpool in particular, so the 2 areas that you cited, Kensington and Greenbank, Smithdown Road in particular, they're very close to the universities. They've always been the student areas. And then what happened after the capital of culture came through Liverpool is Liverpool was getting touted heavily across all international markets as the place to invest. So it became a hotspot.
Right.
So yeah, not just nationally, but internationally. So huge amounts of developments went up, and huge amounts of money came in.
This is Gareth's tenuous link here, but since the big promotion that everyone should go to university, come rain or high water, is that what's pushed the huge rise in the growth of HMOs, for instance, in Liverpool?
Funnily enough, there's been a huge amount of purpose-built student accommodation that's gone up in Liverpool that's actually decimated the HMO markets in Liverpool, but also caused it to concentrate into those core areas.
Very interesting. Hamish, you are often seeing people doing searches, specifically searches for perhaps expanding or changing a building into being suitable for HMOs. Have you seen an uptick in that over the last, say, 5 years?
Well, we did tend to see that side of it, to be perfectly honest. What we actually sort of see is in the information collected, because being hidden behind a screen almost, what we tend to see is the information held by the local councils. And as sort of indicated, and Juliet sort of pointed this one out as well, we're seeing more and more areas being subjected to an Article 4, which means that in order to obtain, I don't know quite what the ruling is now, but if it was a house, an HSO, house of several occupation, house of several occupation, I don't believe there is a need to put in that planning permission. It's something which has always existed. I remember back when I first qualified as a teacher that was the only opportunity that I had to live in somewhere like High Wycombe, if I was to go and teach in High Wycombe. But bit by bit, there are more and more councils we see adding in this particular, and particularly in London, because we used to cover an awful lot of the London boroughs as well. We would actually sort of see these Article 4s coming up, whereas when we first started 20 years ago, there were very, very few of them. It was a rare thing to actually sort of see, whereas, as I said, more recently, it's actually become, and when you actually think about it, there were, when we called them flats, depending on which part of the country you came from. I think further north they might be called tenements. Down here they were called sort of flats. But basically it was a sort of almost a bed and breakfast, but had the breakfast sort of type touch. And you just had loads of separate rooms. But items have changed. And interestingly enough, we have within 50 yards of where our house happens to be, there are 2 HMOs. And neither one of them, absolutely, but you barely see anybody. They are just really sort of part of the sort of fabric, sort of almost, and they're really sort of part of the community, because they'll sort of wave, say hello, and sort of all the rest of it, and absolutely no challenge whatsoever. That's, in fact, it's probably an advantage to have them as HMOs compared to some of the places that there are sort of just full of overfilled, like sort of Juliet suggested. But I do think a benefit to society.
Right. Juliet, just I got a couple more figures. Massive increases in 1 year in places like East Devon, where it was 523% change uptick in the use of HMOs. Wandsworth in London, of course, 381. Wolverhampton 233. There's no real reduction in the popularity of HMOs. I can see it only as a force for good going forward.
There's not going to be. I mean, you've got situations where the cost of living has gone up, and people need to find ways and means to live, especially if they're working in those areas. Sometimes it's more expensive to commute in than to do a sort of a shared living arrangement where you're sharing expenses, etc. It's too expensive to either go into your own house, etc. So the shared accommodation is the suitable alternative in terms of affordability, and they mightn't be stock either. So you may be looking for a property, etc. And I like the way Chris has put it. It's an interim stopgap, that helps people while they move on to whatever they need to move on to. You might be looking to buy, and you don't want to rush into it. So this sort of stopgap arrangement is a suitable type of arrangement if done well. So when looking at it, it's a bit of a balancing act. People need to be housed. Yes, they need to be housed correctly, so that correct proportions, the correct amenities, etc., are available to them. And I guess, in terms of these Article 4s, these local authorities need to find ways to make money as well. So it's one of those ways of, regulating, but also it's a form of income. So I'm not surprised with those statistics, Gareth, because it is, given this type of economy where salaries haven't increased, but the cost of living has, an HMO is a probable solution.
Yes, amazing. I wish the government would read Laszlo's hierarchy of needs and probably take notice of that, but that ain't happening anytime soon either. Thank you so much, Juliet, and thank you all for watching today. And first, let me thank Chris Gilson, our resident expert. Property developer, Root Home, Hamish Clare of Search Convey, the search and specialist, and of course our tame legal eagle, Juliet Babulal of Gunner Cook. And to all you watching, please take note of some of these things. They are trends that are happening, and perhaps you might wake up to the idea that HMOs are not the big baddie that once they were, but they are in fact a possible actual solution to a problem that actually exists and will continue to get worse over time, or worse, continue to grow over time. Let's say that. And until the government, the councils, etc., put their hands in their pockets and start building at the rate that they actually promised, I think it's only an issue that's going to continue to grow. Until next week, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and hopefully look after your mental health. Until next time, bye-bye.